Hey everybody, how's it going? Hopefully actually this you guys can actually hear me there. I'm just making sure. Give me a second. Gotta go to the other YouTube and make sure I can actually hear what I'm saying, or else it's gonna be pretty bad. I've had a lot of problems today. I spent lots of time trying to figure out what's going on here. All right, so yeah, I can be heard. That's yeah, I've had a lot of problems. OBS, Zoom, and Discord are all going to be different issues for finding the camera, seeing the feed, everything. So let's see which camera this is. This camera. There we are. So there we go. So new setup. There's the map behind me of Deadlands, the Weird West. So anyways, yes, I'm going to just make sure this is being shared here right now to different people. If they want to check it out right now, they're welcome to. There we go. Just going to do a couple different ones there. And my cats are being idiotic. Sorry about this. Where is my post? And that. All right. So yes, you want to run a Deadlands game. This is just going to be some ones for helping people out, or things that I've done in running the games and Deadlands. I've run the Classic and I've run the Savage Worlds. So we're not worried about the actual system. This is just more how to, tips and stuff for running Deadlands, because it is based in the Old West, not the Weird West, but there's a lot of historical stuff in there. So it all depends on when you're thinking of running this, how real do you want to do it? How close to some of the people that are there in the towns? Like, do you want to have now in the Deadlands game? Tombstone's there, Deadlands is there. Tombstone is there, Phoenix is there, Deadwood is there. You've got the Earps, although they've been dead, according to the system. Just 1 second. Hey, Paul.
Yes.
Gavin's saying, "Don't yell."
I'm not even yelling. I'm talking.
I know. That's what he's saying.
Apparently, Pat's streaming, and I'm not allowed to talk.
So, anyways, yes. So this is out of the basement. I'm Patrick Gleason. We do a Wednesday Twitch live stream for gaming and a Sunday podcast show as well. And this was on Twitch. And like I said, getting issues with Twitch and Discord and OBS. So I'm like YouTube Live, hopefully to get more people to see YouTube. I've done some interviews with two of the people who helped design Deadlands back in the day, Shane Hensley and Matt Forbeck, as well as last week I did on Twitch a one about comparing Classic to the Savage Worlds. So again, we're not worried about the system, we're more worried about running the game. So going back to the thing of, do you want it real or not real? Do you want to use... thank you, Gavin. Did you want to use, like I said, real people, which is good, because there's a lot of those people that are actually in the Deadlands books, and you can find on the Savage Worlds systems Facebook page, the Deadlands role-playing game on Facebook page. I guess I should probably grab some of those pages for you just to upload them there. They are pretty handy to have, and they will give you lots of resources as well. So as I was saying, let's say you want to, the same thing for game masters, for everything, notes are very important. But in Deadlands, one of the things to do is, because it's based in the 1880s in the West, there was issues with racism, bigotry, sexism that were there. It was just a lot of part of the world, the way things were. So this is something you're going to definitely make sure for yourself and your players how you want to deal with that. Do you want to be, if you want to be more, John Ford, where, those words don't, those expressions don't really get used. That's, I'd recommend that. Or if you want to go the Tarantino version, or Unforgiven, where the slurs are used and, a lot of swearing, again, that make sure you talk to your players of how you want to set that up. Because that determines a lot of, the player choices the character choices they might make, and what they want to play and are willing to accept. Okay, so that's one of the big ones to make, decide how, much of the real world are you going to introduce into your Deadlands world. I ran at one time and never had to worry, just we said he insults you, and that's it. We don't have to go into details of what they're saying to the person. The other one is for women. Like the Deadlands is set up to be, it's all sexes. It's fine, but if you're looking at brothels and that sort of thing in the West, unfortunately, a lot of the women there were women. They're as young as 15 or 14 for some of them, and a lot of them are actually owned. Like the brothel saloon owner would pay to have them come there, and they'd own their contract. So technically, it wasn't slavery; it's more similar to indentured servitude in that. But these girls were stuck working there, and they didn't have a way out. So again, now that's not your players obviously don't have that choice, but that's one that's again, how realistic do you want to have your world be compared to the real 1880s? So just letting you know that's there. So I'd recommend again not to follow a lot of that sort of stuff. Keep it more friendly and open, and that way they're when they're meeting the saloon girl, saloon woman, they're there by choice. That's what they want to do, and that sort of thing. I mean, you can have it where it's a bad saloon owner, bad brothel owner as a scenario. That's fine, but I'd recommend not getting too deep into that sort of thing. The other one you'd want to do if you're planning to do Deadlands is do some research, because and there's books out there, there is movies, biographies, documentaries. There is tons of stuff out there that you can get with for information on the Old West. I did an interview as well with someone from the Arizona Ghost Riders. When they do their videos, they have some tongue-in-cheek comedy in there, but they do a lot of research. So if you check out their videos, they will list the resources they use to get that information. So you don't have to go be an Old West major, but it is good to have some sort of idea of the stuff that's going on. And yes, Gavin, there are Deadlands novels as well. I have a couple. I don't have them down here, but there are Deadlands novels. If you actually go to Amazon and you just do a quick search for Deadlands, lands, you'll find some. There's also graphic novels as well. There's a couple of graphic novels. Here's one here just as an example for the oh, it's not taking it. Why is it? Oh, I have too much there. It won't allow me to. Yeah, the title's too long, so I actually can't copy paste it in the chat because it won't let me do that many characters. Yeah. So okay, no worries. But yeah, if you check Amazon, there's a few there. There's also what they call the dime novels from Pinnacle Games. So Pinnacle Games, you'd be able to PEG Inc. You would be able to go. It's funny that the PAG is actually my initials, Patrick Edward Gleason. Anyway, but there's some dime novels there for ideas for some modules and stuff like that. Sorry. I'll give you a link. I just do a quick search, grab and paste. Here's one there. All right. So those are good, handy things to have. Like, again, you don't have to be Old West fan, know everything about it, but having an idea of the culture and the way things were. There was a lot of immigrants coming in because a lot of Europeans, they didn't have any land, they were poor, a whole sort of stuff. So they were coming to Americas to have a chance to actually make a life. And with the Ghost Rock being a big one, that's another one that would bring people over. So now you've sort of decided, okay, you want to be where you want the reality and culture from the Old West in your Deadlands one. Mm-hmm. Your players are another one that you definitely have to have a session 0 with your players. But before you do that, you yourself as a marshal should have an idea of how you want your game and your world to be focused on. What I mean by this is, well, it's the Old West. There's a lot, like if you've seen movies, you can go, there's trains, there's stagecoaches, there's forts, there's homesteads. There's a whole bunch of areas you can either have your party stay at, be listed there, or there's the cattle drives. So how do you want to do your game is important, because if you want to do the blood drive, which is basically a cattle drive and the Weird West, that's great, but just realize that certain types of characters might not make too sense in there. For example, a lawman, well, he might be an ex-lawman doing the cattle drive, but he's not going to be, a current one, or you take more work to fit that in there. So you're going to have to work to do things like same as a weird scientist, the mad scientist. Well, I guess if he's a chuck wagon, he could be the cook and doing stuff like that. But he's not going to be doing walking around with some weird gadget going through because he's not going to have the equipment, no parts to get going through, and it's going to be scaring the cattle.
I mean, I'll take
A blessed could work a martial artist. Well, why is a martial? I mean, you could do stuff with background, but this is things you have to be aware of when you're doing this. Is if you're planning to do that sort of scenario, you're going to have to work with the players to say, okay, well, you can't just say I'm going to come in as a marshal, for Arizona when it's based in Texas, those things like that. So like I said, the cattle drive is there. I had to play the first game I did in the Classic. The players went from town to town and different in forts and different areas and stuff, because that was what I wanted them to do. They were trying to stop the reckoners and trying to figure a way to stop everything. So they were going around finding clues of what was going on. In the new one I did, I wanted them to be based on one town. So everyone was either a resident or recently arrived to the town. And so that's what I had planned. So when I was telling the players for session 0, it was like, this is the plan. There's one town. You'll travel from it, but more of like for doing an adventure, but you're not going to be traveling around the rest of the country because their home base is going to be the town of nowhere. So that's again where, before you even get to session 0, you as a marshal have to have an idea of how you want things to go and what you want your players to, have an idea of what you want your players to do. Always give them the option to change things and go outside the box. That's fine. And that's where you have to be very flexible. It's an AGM. It's just a thing, flexibility. But make sure you're understanding where, like, you can't just come up and say, oh, Tucson is this type of town. It's, it's future. It's, it's like an Eastern town. No, it's not. Whereas, like New Orleans towns, Louisiana towns will be different than Texas towns. That's just because, that's just the world. So that's where you have to be aware of, the Old West. I mean, I know California got crushed and broken up and fell into the ocean a lot, but there's still that, San Francisco sort of mentality for a lot of the area. So that's when, like I said, when you're doing it with your players, you make sure them that they understand, like, hey, I want to be a, let's just see, a top, general from Boston. Like, well, what are you doing? I mean, it's possible, but you're gonna have to work out with the things in the West. Now, the other one for Savage Worlds, because Savage Worlds, I said I know I wouldn't do comparisons, but this is one important for how experienced the NPCs or your PCs are, because there's an edge that's both in the Classic and this new one is called Veteran of the Old West. The Veteran of the Old West means you've seen some of the stuff that's out there. You know that stuff exists and you've dealt with it. Now it's left emotional, mental, or physical scars on you. But this also means you're actually more experienced. You have in both games you have more experience to get skills, to get edges, improve your abilities, and that can make it harder. Some players may not like that, where one player is more experienced than they are to start with. Now, if your players are good, it works, because the new one I started, I had 2 guys who were seasoned, and when it first started, and 2 were seasoned and 2 were novices. But it doesn't really matter. It's because it's like the amount of experience you get is not that much to make the characters that much better than anything else out there. It's just a bare average above the normal person, normal character. So I have no problem with that. Some marshals, like, you may not want to do that. You might want to say, no, I want all people to be the same. So you might say, okay, if one person's seasoned or more experienced, all of them will be. Again, this is where you and your players will have to discuss that. But you should have an idea in mind again before you sit down with your players for session 0 of what you want. And also, you don't want to limit your players for what they can play, but you might want to offer suggestions of what what could be bad in certain situations. You know, um, like in New Orleans, taking, you know, in the voodoo area, and you're taking a full-on, you know, Catholic priest who doesn't like that sort of stuff. You know, nothing wrong with it. That's role-playing opportunities, but make sure you tell your player who's doing that, it's like, okay, this will cause some issues. You know, you might, or same as playing, you know, Apache, if you guys are around, you know, Cherokee or other sort of lands, or even in some areas, you know, yes, you can role play it, but there, you know, there could be difficulties playing that sort of character. And as a marshal, you have to be aware of that to tell your players. Conflict for some things actually helps role playing. So I'll use an example for Baldur's Gate. You know, the drow in that world are most likely, they're considered evil. But because people in a computer game want to be able to play that, all the interactions are basically the same. It doesn't matter if you're a half orc, a halfling, you know, an elf, or a drow. That should not be there when you're doing a Deadlands role-playing game. You know, you don't want to go out of your way to treat them horribly, but make them aware that there will be certain people that will treat them unfairly just based on first reactions. Okay, that actually, don't lean too much into it, but accept it. That'll actually help the game, and if the players understand that and you work with it, and again, you don't single them out and just constantly hit them with it, but here and there, it actually is something that helps out the role playing. When the player is like, okay, I want to play this type of character, like, well, okay, that works for some situations, but in others, you might have some problems. You know, the person that you're trying to buy something with won't want to sell to you at all. So that's where it's like, was the player going to try doing intimidation, persuasion, and all that once? And you can do, this is where the modifiers, throw them out. What they say in the rules is nice, but a lot of times make them up yourself. You know, it, as long as you can reason with it. Like, don't just say, I want to give a +4 or -4 right now. No, you have to be able to justify it in a way. It's like, okay, well, if someone's shooting from the back of a stage, trying to hit, you know, the gun out of someone's hand, that is an extremely hard shot. You know, yes, there's the edges they can take and stuff like that, but still realize that's going to be almost an impossible shot. Same as, you know, the Apache going into Comanche lands and then trying to buy a horse from one of them. There'll be a lot of disadvantages for them. You know? So keep that in mind as well, and use it. Like, don't, again, there's going to be chances for role playing there. So this is the big thing about Deadlands is the role playing, get into that Old West theme, get into that Wheel of Feel, but also, you know, don't punish them too much if they decide to do that. Just, like I said, try to gear them, make them understand that there will be times where there will be negative consequences for that type of character in certain situations. All right, so that's even before you even get to session 0. Like, this is all stuff that you need to understand before you even get to there. The rules are important, obviously, but this is stuff for the role-playing aspect that you need to do. And again, a lot of times, as all the rule books in a game tell you, don't put the rules before story. Again, there's certain times when it's like it's going to be impossible or it doesn't make sense, but always go with the story. The narrative drives the story, not the rules, not the dice rolling. You know, and try to avoid dice rolling as much as possible if you can in certain things. If the players are playing or role playing really well, either give them a modifier, like a plus modifier for that, or, you know, in most cases, don't even bother rolling. Just say, yeah, it's just an average. If it's an average store man, and they're role playing well, the persuasion or the intimidation, don't make them roll it. Just because dice are finicky. If it's just an average person that they're dealing with and they're doing a good job, don't even bother rolling. Just give them the plus, or, you know, give them the thing, or have it work in their favor. If they're doing well, if they're trying to scare the guy, have them do it that way there. It just makes it more sense to keep things moving for the story than having to stop every single time to go, okay, roll some dice. The dice should be there for important things, not the day-to-day minutia. The other one is, and I know people, and I've watched Ox Adventure, and that they do YouTube ones. They did a Deadlands one. Let me just pull up their Venture, Deadlands, because they did a good job, and
It's gonna be
I like it. And same as Critical Role did one on Deadlands as well, and they're interesting. But please, please do not judge your game and your players from these. Critical Role and Axe Venture, these are guys who are experienced with um, improv and acting and that. So they have production value. So they have a lot going for them when they do this sort of thing. You know, you should try to have some role playing and voices, but don't force your players to do voices or dress a certain way or act that way. Because again, that starts to put a lot of pressure on the players. If you're like, well, I want you to talk the way your character would, or I want you to do the mannerisms. It's not easy for most people, right? So don't say, well, I want you to talk that way. No, let them talk their normal way if they want to. If they want to try this, doing their voices or mannerism, great. You know what you do in that case? You give them an extra penny or a chip. You're like, here's a reward because you did this. But also make sure to give everyone the same thing. Like, don't always reward the one player. Because again, if other players are not comfortable or not that good at doing the voices or mannerism or that, do not give them bennies because of that. So that's why I'm saying Axe Venture and Critical Role are great. They give good stories, but don't think you're going to run a game like that with your players. If you do, more power to you. But don't be surprised if that's not the way you play. So that's what I'm saying. In those ones as well, they give a lot of descriptions for when they're actually, putting the death blow down or that. Again, it sounds great if they describe how you're actually, killing the person or stealing the thing or whatever. If you're doing great rules, that's good. But again, don't make that the focus. If the players are willing to do it, great. Again, no problem. Let them describe it. Let them do this. But you don't want to do that again all the time because it slows down combat or the interactions. Because if you're doing an interaction with an NPC, you don't want to start describing it like, don't want the player to say, well, I'm, have them describe exactly what they're doing when they're interacting with an NPC. You want the dialogue and the story to move forward. So it's a good idea. If you want to dress in the West things, great, but you don't have to. Theater of the mind is a big one. But like I said, don't make people describe everything. And don't describe everything. Don't over describe yourself. Don't do over descriptions of everything. Keep it simple to start, because if they ask you, then okay, if you give like it's a saloon, it's dusty, it's all this, but don't give too much detail, because then they say, well, is there a mirror? And you're like, yeah, sure, there's a mirror. Or is there a barrel over here? Yes, there's a barrel. So as you're talking, as you're describing things, start basic, but then you can always build up. Sorry, Gavin. So as I said, as you work with the players and you're telling the story, the areas can get built up for what they want and what they need for the game. Now, if it's a particular thing that you have set up, like the bank or whatever, and there's you have it mapped out, that's fine. That's okay. But I'm saying it's actually a good idea to be more bare bones for a lot of things, because as you're going along with your players, as you guys get more experience with each other, if you're new players, a new posse, you can work with them to help you describe, get the fuller description of the place or what's happening. So again, describe, but don't over describe. Don't force descriptions on your players. If they want to, great. But don't always reward them for doing that, because those who can't then will feel left out and will be a little, they're like, well, that person, because they're better at explaining or describing things, is getting more bennies. So don't do that. You want to make sure all your players are getting, treated equally, even if they can't describe or, act out as well as the other ones. That's okay. Again, also, same as in other games, you want to make sure all players get a chance to say something or do something. Now, again, if you're telling a story, you try not to have too many interruptions. Especially the best one is all players, like the bad guy starts talking, like, I'm just going to shoot him. You can do that too. Like, you let them do that sometimes if they shoot the person before even talking, because do it in the reverse. If the players want to start talking to someone who's their enemy, and have the enemy just shoot them. So, sorry, I like the classic just for the poker chips you give out people. I like Suede because they give bennies. The problem with the classic is those chips count for experience as well, whereas the Savage Worlds, the bennies are just bennies. They just back and forth. So like I said, I recommend using the chips, but then have a separate one for experience. So now we have an idea of what sort of game you want to run. You have an idea what the players should be. Like you're hoping they have an idea of what they want to be. You have an idea if you're doing the John Ford or Tarantino sort of westerns, and all that. The best one then is session 0. Now, this is where it can be, because I know nowadays if it's hard for some people who don't have anyone in their area to game with, or they're not familiar with anyone, so doing it virtually. So this is where session 0s are very important. I recommend even session -1, if you will, where the players, not even doing a session 0, and just have the players get together to chat and talk about things, just so you have an idea that the players interact well enough. If, like I said, even before you get to session 0, you might have to do this more than once or twice to try and find the right group of players that you're like, okay, everyone connects well enough, everyone's doing well. Okay, now we're going to do a session 0. If you already have a group of friends, then they're all well, then just go to the session 0 and start. But I recommend before you even do a session 0 with, because like I said, Deadlands has a lot of historical stuff in there, and some of it's not the most pleasant one for some people. So this is where some people might go too hard on that, and other people might not react very badly to it. So this is where you should have just sit down with people and just, okay, here's Deadlands, here's the thing. You're not even doing session 0, just explain what Deadlands is and see how everyone interacts with each other for that. That probably would help you a lot, just like I said, because Deadlands can be it can stir up a lot of emotions with people, let's just say. So that's why having a session -1 or even -2 with people that you're don't know, or definitely doing remote, so that way they sort of get used to each other and make sure everyone feels comfortable with one. Then go on to session 0 and say, okay, now that we've comfortable with each other, we understand each other, here's how we're going to go for running the game. And I would try to have an end goal, as I said earlier, an end goal there. And now, there might be branches off, there might be things changing, but if you have an end goal already in mind, that helps you do the stories that you want to do with them. Again, if you have players that drive the story more, that are make an open sandbox and do things, that's great. But you should still have an end goal in mind for what you want to happen. The first one, like I said, I had. Right. The end goal was for them to end up in the hunting grounds to try and deal with the record. Well, some in the hunting grounds, other people's outside protecting everybody. So there's different levels of combat, but that was the end goal. Is they'd be trying to go into the hunting grounds to stop the reckoners, one way or another. So it took long circuitous routes, but I eventually got them there. In the new one, they're based in one town, but nowhere. But I planned it that there was going to be there's a tree there, that the tree in Arizona, it's an old grove, it's a strange tree, but there was a grove, there was 2 trees that were connected, and basically that opened up, had an opening to the hunting grounds, the weird, whatever you want to call it, but the other side. So, and again, there was going to be things trying to come about, and not necessarily stopping the reckoners overall, but trying to keep the town safe and out of exploding danger. So that I never got a chance to finish that. And Gavin on the chat and his wife Jess, I still want to try to do a little solo stuff with them here and there, just trying to find the time, and it's so hard to do. But I guess I have to do it remote. I'd rather do it in person, but because it's just too much hard to do, I'm obviously going to have to do it remote with them. But I have an idea of where they want to go. They're going to be traveling around instead. So I realized they're going to be traveling, like a lawman and sort of a saloon girl singer. They're going to be traveling around. I don't really have an end goal in yet because I'm still not sure how I'm going to do this. But again, so if you have an end goal, and great, and then you can break it up as Critical Role and Axe Venture do in different segments. Now, again, because real life comes in, not every player is going to be there all the time, and that's okay if you're doing a new chunk. If some people can't make it, and you're like, okay, these people are there. But the same as other games, um, it's not like a dungeon, right? Where there's okay, how do you explain the dwarf showing up when we've been in the dungeon for 3 days? And Deadlands, I recommend doing the coincidence. Okay, that character wasn't there to start with, but they saw you're missing, they rode the horse, they showed up at this time. So don't, if it's like people are sick, kids, whatever, don't punish the player for not being able to show up. But if most of your players agree they want to keep playing without that one or two players there, go ahead. But again, don't punish the other players too much for them. Still give them a little bit of experience, like not as much, but just give them a little bit, just to because it's not their fault they couldn't make it, and you don't want to penalize players and that. So give them a little bit of experience, not as much. How you do you'll work it out with your players to see how things go. So I'd recommend again doing chapters if you can. I learned from earlier experience, but I'm not a module type runner, or GM Marshall. I'll read any modules in that. I'll go, that sounds cool. Now I will pull shit out of my ass, as they say, and just go with it. I'm fine for just getting people together and it's like, okay, have a bare idea of what it is. But I still have a bare idea. Even though I may not have all the the stats written down, I have an idea. Okay, this person is going to be a medium threat or a high threat or a low threat with other low threats around. That'll be and go from there. And this is also where notes, as I've said, for other games, everything are very important. As I've done in other games, if you don't want to write the notes, that's okay. Ask the players to do that. Because that's often, if every player does their own notes and you have your different notes, it's interesting after all to compare what the players focused on in the session and what you consider to be important. That actually leads to some fun stories. But I'd still, like I said, you don't have to have every bad guy written out. You don't have to have every scenario fully fleshed out. If you do, that's great. That's fine. But just realize a lot of players, that won't last long. They'll do something that you weren't expecting. So I recommend having a rough draft of what you want the story to go, what they're going to face, because there's in the Deadlands books and elsewhere, there's all sorts of baddies that you can easily pull up and just, again, it's like it's a gunslinger. It's easy enough to do modifications for the gunslinger to make him different than other ones else there. But all you do is say there's a gunslinger. You don't have to give him the stats yet because they may not fight him. They might not run into him. So this is what I'm saying. If you sometimes if you pull all this information of your bad guy, okay, he's going to have this quickness or agility, that and everything. But if the players talk to him in the right way or other stuff, they may not actually fight him. So you've spent all this time making an NPCs that don't get any reaction. So that's why I say keep a rough draft is better. Just have an idea of threat levels is what you should go off of based on what they are compared to that. And if you have one that's way too high, you're like, and then you're like, ooh, that's too hard. Fudge dice. As a marshal, be willing to fudge dice. Don't have people get killed off by random stuff badly if it happens. I'm known for doing that, actually, but try not to kill the players right off the bat. I don't cheat. Don't be like, oh, make them succeed all the time. But if it's sometimes going to be really, really bad for them, like explosion goes, yes, I'm green. I recommend, that's why you want the GM screen, because sometimes you don't want to really, they've done some bad dice rolls. It's not their fault. It's just the dice, twos and ones. So don't kill them off because of that. Try to help them around. NPCs can come in, other things to help them out. And this is again where, going back to way back, how historical do you want? Do you want the Earps there? Do you want Billy the Kid there? There's lots of movies and books on Westerns all there. There's so many other characters you can pull out. and just use those. And again, a rough draft is better in my mind, in my opinion. But if you prefer, if you would like better, write everything out, have it all written out, great. If you follow the module as is, that's fine. That's if that works for you. If it works for you, go with it. Don't listen to me. Do it yourself. Listen to your own ideas. But just remember, like I said, hi Thorn. Thanks for walking by in front of my camera. He was doing so good. But that's basically the idea that we're looking at. Is you want to be able to
I'm just trying to figure out.
keep the story flowing, keep the game going without getting stuck in dice rolls all the time. That's the big one I recommend for you as a marshal, is be prepared to change things and keep the story flowing. Don't force players to be descriptive. Don't force players to act out in a certain way. It all depends on your players. And this is where I said it's if you're meeting new people, have a couple of chats before even session 0, just to make sure everyone's on the same idea of what they're looking, how they want to play characters and what they want. So I hope this helped everyone. And I know Gavin's now excited for me saying I'm going to run Ken and Jess through a couple sessions when I can. And I've given him some work to watch Ox Adventure. Critical Role's cool, but I actually like the Ox Adventure guys as well. They did a good job. And and anyways, thank you very much for watching. If you're seeing this later on, please note, like I said, I do have some interviews out there on our Facebook page. So if you're watching this, you're on our YouTube page. So go check out some of the other videos I've done. I'm liking this sort of open chat I've been doing. I did, like I said, last week I did one on the Classic versus Savage Worlds. The one before that was basically doing a review of the Marvel Multiverse role-playing game. So I'm hoping you guys will actually start to check it out. Yes, I'm planning to do other ones, Gavin. I'm actually thinking next week I'll be switching from Deadlands, going back into superheroes. I'll be doing a comparison of some of the different superhero games I've played. Champions, Villains and Vigilantes, Marvel role-playing, the different versions. And, well, those are actually, they're 2 to the Marvel one, so I'll be doing that one there. So again, I hope you like this. I hope you check it out. I'll make sure to tag this as much as I can when this goes up. And thank you very much. Thank you very much, Gavin, for interacting. That is great. I'll chat with you later. Have a good one, everybody.
Which I guess we're doing now, right?